Shalom, everyone. My name is sternklar. The title of these lessons is Perfect Harmony, the Torah Blueprint for Humanity's Partnership with Hashem in the Scientific Age. As you can see from my email, I am affiliated with Ariel University. I'm a professor in the Electrical and Electronic Engineering Department. The material that I will present in these talks is based upon a series of articles called Harmony, which I've been engaged in. My email appears below. I will be more than happy to hear your comments, questions, whatever else you would like to share with me. Just a word or two about Ariel University. The beautiful campus of Ariel is located in the city of Ariel. Ariel, the city of Ariel, is located in the biblical heartland of Samaria in central Israel. About a 35-minute ride east of the Tel Aviv metropolitan area, and about an hour and 15 minutes north from our capital, the holy city of Jerusalem. The goal of these lessons is to try to discard some misconceptions that we may have about Hashem and replace them with a better understanding of Hashem's messages to humanity and his plan for his creation. We will try to reveal a profound partnership that exists between Hashem and his human partners. We will realize how faith, knowledge, and scientific discovery are partners in illuminating the truth of our existence. The tools at our disposal: principles of Jewish faith. We will go through principles of the written Torah and the oral Torah. We will go through major principles and teachings of the great Torah scholars throughout the ages. We will review the amazing, awesome technique called the modern scientific method, and we'll look at some major scientific discoveries. We will go through some history and, of course, use our common sense. So we will learn together some portions of the Torah, and we'll take a deep dive into the messages that Hashem wishes to convey. So we will see, hopefully, how our understanding of physical reality through scientific study can also aid in understanding Hashem's messages and plan. And I think that we will eventually begin to see the harmony that exists in reality and results from a synthesis of the spiritual and physical parts of our existence. This will reveal a unified picture where faith, knowledge, and scientific discovery are not opposing forces. On the contrary, they work together naturally to guide humanity to a meeting of the minds with our Creator. So I would like to start by posing a challenging question. This question concerns the relationship between the Creator and his awesome creations, and specifically his amazing, highly intelligent creation known as the human being. Humans are blessed with the unique capability to dream amazing dreams, develop elegant equations that describe our physical reality. And this is part of our never-ending quest to understand our reality and harness it in innovative ways. So here, for example, we see two very important equations that were developed in the first decades of the 20th century that forever changed our understanding of reality. The first is Einstein's famous equation that unites mass with energy. And the second is Schrodinger's equation of quantum mechanics that describes how reality is really very counterintuitive, not comprehensible. It is wave-like in nature, with a built-in uncertainty or indeterminacy. But more of this later on as we get on in our talk. Humans are very intelligent and creative and capable of abstract thinking out of the box. Here is a Salvador Dali's famous masterpiece of surrealism from 1931 called The Persistence of Memory. Humans possess this awesome intelligence not shared by other living creatures. There are scientific studies that point to some level of intelligence in the animal kingdom, such as the dolphin. But the best that a dolphin can do is randomly scribble some colors on canvas. Do dolphins ask themselves what life is all about, what is expected of them, or how the universe evolved? The only life form that we know of that asks these questions are humans. Now, here is the basic question that I'd like to pose. I think it is safe to assume that the Creator possesses much higher intelligence than his creations. He surely realized that his creation will want to understand how and why they have been created. Hashem would certainly realize that at some point in their evolution, these human beings that he created would begin to search for explanations that satisfy their intellectual curiosity. Now, the Torah conveys to humanity messages and commandments relating to belief in Hashem, knowing Hashem, loving Hashem, and an ethical code of conduct. However, it seems as though this Hashem is not easily perceivable by us highly intelligent creatures. This is Edward Munch's famous work called The Scream in 1893. In our discussions, we will address these issues, including the questions of contemporary scientists which require our attention. How can we believe and love Hashem if he is elusive, hard to perceive, let alone engage in a partnership with? So this is a very challenging issue that we will focus on. Before we address these challenging questions, let's first briefly review some major events in Jewish history, some basic concepts of the written and oral Torah, and mention some of the main Torah scholars and commentators of the Torah that we will refer to in our discussion. Then we will review some important concepts of the modern scientific method. With this background information in place, we will then be ready to begin our study of the Torah's universal messages to humanity as described in Genesis, the first book of the 5 books of the Torah. I believe that this approach will lead to a new understanding of what Hashem's grand plan is and is the key to taking on these challenging questions that we asked. So here is a very nicely designed timeline of Jewish history that I found online, free to download. So here we see 2 timelines, this upper one and the lower one. The upper one runs according to the years and counting up from the BCE era, well, more exactly counting down to 0 and then counting up in the Common Era. And the lower one is the Hebrew calendar, starting from year 1 of the Hebrew calendar. What is year 1 of the Hebrew calendar? The year or the time in which the humans, Adam and Eve, appeared or emerged. The first creation is described as being in the form of what's written in Hebrew, Tselem Elohim, meaning Hashem's image. This event is so significant for the development of the world that the Hebrew calendar starts from this point and does not start counting from the billions of years that preceded it. And we will certainly get into this point later on. The various colors that we see on top depict the Jewish population in various parts of the world. For example, as you can see from this color code, blue signifies the population in the land of Israel, orange signifies Asia, Africa, and Turkey, and so on and so forth. So here's the biblical period, First Temple period, Second Temple period, the 70-year exile between these two temples, the long exile after the Second Temple period, and the period of the return to the land of Israel starting in the roughly in the 18th century. Now, a short history of the historical development of the oral Torah. The first religious leader of the fledgling nation of Israel, Moses, received the Torah on Mount Sinai in the 14th century BCE. For 40 days and 40 nights, with the children of Israel waiting in anticipation at the foot of the mountain, Hashem spoke with Moses and orally transferred the Torah to him. He received the Torah orally by Hashem while the Ten Commandments were written. When Moses returned, a process was put in place to orally transmit the Torah to his generation and future generations. Now, in parallel, an abridged version of this oral Torah was written down and is known as the 5 books of the Torah. It was clear that it is impossible to properly understand the written Torah without the explanations of the oral Torah. It was also clear that the written Torah deliberately conveys its messages on several levels. These levels start from the basic literal translation, moving on to an exegetic methodology that is based upon a known set of rules, moving on to midrashic interpretations, and finally the deepest levels that were not meant for general consumption and were expressed cryptically. We will get into this structure of the oral Torah later on. However, over time, some of the teachings of the oral Torah were in danger of being forgotten or distorted. This problem was compounded by the introduction of foreign influences into Jewish culture in this period, exile from the land of Israel, and translation of the written Torah, which we will also discuss shortly. Despite the prohibition to write down the oral Torah, which was meant to stay oral, Jewish sages realized that the exile of the Jewish people will lead to further degradation. And so in the 2nd century CE, the sages began the process of codifying and writing down the oral Torah, including the first codified version of Jewish law, known as the Mishnah. Now, let's go back to the written Torah. Until the 3rd century CE, throughout this period, the written Torah was only in Hebrew. The Torah sages were firmly against translating it to other languages. The reason was simple. Only the original Hebrew text can convey all of the messages from the simplest level to the deepest, with all of the required nuances and means of interpretation, as explained and expounded upon in the oral Torah. A translated version was felt to corrupt these messages. However, despite these objections, the Greek conquerors in this period demanded that this Torah be translated, resulting in the first translation to the Greek language by 70 Jewish scholars in the 3rd and 2nd century BCE. Okay, so we're now in this period. This was followed by translations into other languages. The first English translation was written in the 7th century CE, and eventually the King James Version appeared in the 16th century. Now, today, there are several modern versions of the English translation, which are not based on the authentic Jewish traditions as described in the oral Torah. To fill this void, Jewish scholars over the past century have published translations that are based on traditional Jewish principles and leading Jewish commentators. These Jewish translations have gone a long way in undoing much of the damage that has accumulated over more than 2,000 years. However, they still, in general, do not consider a portion of the oral Torah that deals with a deeper understanding of the written Torah. This deeper level is known in Hebrew as Torah Tasod, or the secret Torah. It is also called the Kabbalah, or the received Torah, since it was passed down and received orally by a select few throughout the generations, but was not disseminated to the public. It was widely accepted that this level of Torah learning should only be studied orally and only by those students deemed worthy of learning the Kabbalah under the guidance of a learned teacher. Now, I would like to briefly mention several of main giant luminaries of Jewish law, philosophy, logic, science, and commentators of the Torah. Let's start with Maimonides, known in Hebrew as the Rambam, which is an acronym for Rabbi Moshe, the son of Maimon. He lived most of his adult life in Morocco and Egypt, where he served as the revered leader of the Jewish community. Besides working as a physician, he's considered to be one of the most prolific and influential Torah scholars of all times. He arranged and codified Jewish law, was an expert in philosophy and medicine, and wrote many important works in which he set down his principles of Torah study based on Jewish theology, logic, and contemporary science. Now, in his time, contemporary science was still a Greek philosophy, Aristotelian, mostly Aristotelian, and Plato, logic, and philosophy. We will return to this Rambam and his revolutionary principles of Torah study. Another very influential medieval Jewish scholar is Nachmanides, also known as the Ramban, which is the acronym for Rabbi Moshe, the son of Nachman. Starting from the 13th century, Torah scholars began to reveal and write down various teachings of the Kabbalah and to explain the written Torah on its deepest levels. The Ramban, who was born in Spain and later in life moved to the land of Israel, was one of the first Jewish scholars to embark on this project and wrote a detailed commentary on the written Torah, which included the Kabbalah teachings. Subsequently, his disciples and other commentaries adopted his methodology, which over the centuries led to many written works based on the Kabbalah. Moving on to the 18th century, the Vilna Gaon, which means the great teacher of Vilna, he lived in the city of Vilna in the Russian Empire. He was one of the foremost Torah scholars since the Middle Ages. Besides his immense influence on Jewish law, Torah commentary, and Kabbalah, he called for Jewish resettlement of the land of Israel. Many of his students did make Aliyah to Israel beginning in the year 1808, first settling in the city of Tzfat in the Galil, and then some of them moved on to Jerusalem, where they reestablished the Ashkenazi community in Jerusalem. This wave of Aliyah was not actually the first. It came on the heels of a previous wave in the 18th century by followers of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of Hasidic Judaism. Now, these first waves of religiously inspired Aliyah in the 18th and 19th century, after 1,800 years of exile from the land of Israel, were a result of the Torah's clear messages regarding living in the land of Israel. And also, this is written messages as well as the Torah's, oral Torah's messages, and also our daily Jewish prayers to eventually leave the exile and return to the land of Israel. This religious movement can be considered to be the beginning of the modern return to Zion. This was followed by more waves of Aliyah over the 19th and 20th centuries, which eventually led to the establishment of the State of Israel. The Vilna Gaon also encouraged the study of secular subjects such as mathematics, engineering, astronomy, geometry, biology, and music. He wrote a book on some of these subjects and requested that the students translate other books of mathematics into Hebrew. He is quoted as saying, "Just as a person will lack knowledge of other wisdoms, so too will they be missing 100-fold in the wisdom of Torah." The last few decades of the 19th century were a time of upheaval and great suffering for the Jewish people, but also a period of national resurgence and return to the biblical homeland of Israel. Among the rabbinical leaders that emerged during this period of the return to Zion, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook, Rabbi Cook, stands out as one of the most influential scholars in Jewish law, halakha, philosophy, and he realized that the historic events that were unfolding, unprecedented in their global and Jewish national impact, were a realization of the ancient Jewish prophecies and perfectly fell in line with the deepest teachings of the Kabbalah. During his 50 active years as a rabbi in several locations in Eastern Europe, culminating with the position of chief rabbi of British Mandatory Palestine during the first 3 decades of the 20th century, he wrote prolifically, stressing the importance of understanding the deep ramifications of the new world order that is unfolding. As part of this process, he emphasized the importance of revealing and disseminating the deeper messages of the Torah. He was well aware of the scientific revolution that was transpiring, starting with Darwin's astounding theory of evolution in the 19th century, new ideas in philosophy and psychology, and the new physics that developed in the first few decades of the 20th century. He understood that humanity was advancing to higher levels of morality and knowledge at an unprecedented pace. He stressed that in these modern times, a deeper, all-encompassing understanding of the Torah is necessary to grasp Hashem's master plan as they appear in the written and oral Torah. In this fashion, the hard questions that intelligent people are asking about Hashem can be addressed intelligently. Well, our time is up for now. Let's summarize. We asked some challenging questions about our relationship with Hashem, how to believe in Hashem, know Hashem, love Hashem. We expect intuitively satisfying answers because it seems that this Hashem is not easy to perceive by us highly intelligent human beings. So in our discussions, we will address these issues and also including some challenging questions of contemporary scientists, which require our attention. We briefly reviewed some basic Jewish history, the written and oral Torah, described a few of the major Torah scholars that we will refer to. Now, people began asking these questions some time ago, more or less in parallel with the emergence of the modern scientific method in the 17th and 18th centuries. So we will need to understand this awesome technique called the scientific method. Our time is up for now. We will start our next talk with a brief review of the scientific method. That's all for now.